Welcome to SOULutions, where men come out of the shadows to testify, giving tips in manhood, honor the codes of integrity, and give out real solutions for soul survival. Today, we have on the show a man of rebirth, a man who teaches how to rise after the fall, a man who is dedicated to the balance of love, life, and laughter. If you need help overcoming your struggles and demons, he will guide you to the information needed for you to take the leap. Ladies and gentlemen, the humanitarian, the fighter, the recoverer, Mr. Life is Wonderful himself, Mr. Hugo V.
Yeah. Welcome. Good morning. It's good morning here. I'm in Houston, Texas, so it's good morning. I appreciate it.
And what's going on, man? You feeling okay?
I'm feeling great, man. It was a good weekend. Got a lot done. Always ready to start a new day, new week, new month.
Absolutely. Are you ready to drop these gems and answer these questions today?
I am. Let's go.
Here we go. What person did you meet or see that gave you the drive towards the man you are today? Who or what defined you?
That's more than one person, but I will tell you about, I'll start with the most important thing about, because we're talking about man getting up, is work ethic. And I got that from my father. My father and both my parents, they were born in Bolivia, South America, came to New York. They were that kind of like that immigrant story. You know, there was a lot of political and economic upheaval in the early 60s in Bolivia. So they came here. My dad was always a dreamer, optimistic. He was always optimistic. He was like the death of a salesman. He was like Wally Loman, you know. There's always a day to make $1 million. There's always a day to turn it around, even when the chips are down. So, but he always worked. Even, you know, he worked his way up. He came to this country even before I was born, you know, had to take those kind of like janitorial, really kind of office types of jobs, worked his way into sales, started a business. Then he went bankrupt, which was personal and business bankruptcy. But then he had the work ethic that he worked 7 days a week. He worked at one job Monday through Friday. They didn't pay as much as he had done before, but then he was doing telemarketing on the weekend, doing whatever was needed to keep the family going. So he always had that work ethic that my brother and I always kind of emulated. And that's the one thing we picked up. So for business, for school, for athletics, there was always that kind of drive to do more. And I got that from my dad. The work ethic I got from my dad. I got other things from other people, but like we're talking about solutions. I think when I hit rock bottom, I really realized, and I know you're going to touch on some of this other stuff, but I knew I had it within me to do the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And having work ethic is something that everyone doesn't have, or everyone has not had the privilege to see it form or someone put in that kind of work. Tell me the nuances of it. When you watch your dad work so hard, did you ever say, "Daddy, why are you working so hard?" Or did you say, "Go, Daddy, go"?
I actually did neither. It was one of those things is that, you know, when you see it as a child, it almost becomes part of the norm. So it wasn't like, "Why are you working so hard?" or "I'd be your cheerleader." It was like, this is what we do.
Right.
It's like there is no feel sorry for yourself, but there's also no accolades.
Right.
And I think I had to kind of learn that. You know, here's the thing is, and I talk about this more about emotions. I didn't get a lot of emotional support growing up, but I got pushed. My parents always pushed us academically, athletically, and then we went to church every day. Growing up Catholic, went to church every Saturday night. So we were always pushed spiritually. So it was one of those things is that you just it just became part of the norm. You know, my mom took care of the house. My brother and I were expected to do well in school, and any extracurriculars, we were expected to, you know, push ourselves. So it was one of those things is that you realize later on that everybody isn't able to watch someone just get up and do it.
Right.
It becomes almost part of your DNA.
Right.
Because it's not in your DNA, but it's almost that environmental DNA. And then you don't realize how valuable that is.
What was the feeling like for you when you realized that, hey, other people don't know how to work this hard and it's so valuable that you have this tool?
Well, you just try to share it. There's a thing in recovery where we talk about attraction rather than promotion. You show people, you don't brag about it going, oh, I work so hard. I hate when people say I work 80 hours. It's like, who cares? I mean, are you having a life? I mean, the question is have a life.
Right.
It's not a question is how many, somehow that's a badge of honor, how many hours you work in a week. It's how much do you do in the week? Because some people, there's those things is like, people are saying like, well, can we go down to a 30-hour work week? Well, if you're making money, living your life, being around the people you love and enjoy being around, doing the things you want to do, it doesn't matter how much you work. It's how much you're actually able to produce.
Helping others and being a person of change is also very important within that realm. Absolutely. You spoke some powerful words there, sir. I appreciate that. And I accept that. Yes, it's how much you do during the week, not how much you work, because there's so many duties and things that need to be done. Absolutely.
You're right. You still got to walk the dog. You still got to check in with your mama. You still got to eat right. You still got to do a lot of things.
You got to work out. You got to do a bunch of things.
That's right.
Do you have a vision board?
What I do, I do not. I know a lot of people believe in that. What I do have is a mission statement, a personal mission statement. I also have a company mission statement. And I will say the two most important things that I strive for every day within my personal mission statement is contentment and serenity. And the reason is that doing a lot of research on spirituality, a lot of people here in America or even around and I know a lot in Western worlds, they talk about happiness. I just want to be happy. And what I learned in emotions is that happiness is an emotion and it's fleeting. You cannot be happy every moment and you cannot be happy every day. I'll give you this example, but you can be content. So let me say, so contentment is that you are satisfied with what you're doing every day, whether that's working, whether that's enjoying your vacation, whether that's just being with some loved ones, family, friends. And I learned that, you read a lot about that in the Buddhist kind of religion, in the way they kind of search for enlightenment and contentment. And the reason why I search for contentment instead of happiness is that even when my dad died 5 years ago, I was sad. See, when he died, I was not happy. I was sad. I was grieving. Those were natural, normal emotions, but I was content. And I was content because since I had sought recovery back in 2000, I was able to make amends for things that I have said and I did, things that affected not only our personal relationship, we worked together for 20 years, our business relationship, that when he died, I was content that there was nothing that was left unsaid or undone. And that we were able to get very close those last 16 years, something that we kind of drifted apart for probably about 15 years. And so I was content. And so you can be content every day. I think that's actually something that really people need to look at instead of always saying, I want to be happy. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be depressed if something happens. It's okay to be angry. I mean, that's normal. And the other thing is about serenity is that when I finally got to the point of rock bottom, I was always fighting. And the one I was fighting with the most was myself. I had no peace. There was always this war rage inside me. And so when I first walked into a 12-step meeting and I see these words like serenity, peace, I was like, those felt so elusive. But I said that I want that. And that's one of the other things that was really a driving force in just seeking more into recovery is because I had to find out how to become more serene and then more content.
That's the perfect balance. Now that you spoke about this type of approach, and I can see myself being both of those things that sometimes, even with hyper situations, the people who are the most calmest and understand the situation more make the best decisions. their blood pressure, they stay the healthiest at the moment. They're able to communicate properly. Yeah, you put a title on it for me. I never knew what the feeling was to have contentment and to be serene, but I totally understand it. And I believe we help somebody today with the gems you just dropped with that information. Talk to me
Or-
about talk to me about the moments. Give me one apex moment where your contentment and your serenity held true for you in the moment. Like it was like, oh, yeah, this is the moment that I have this contentment and serenity to get me past this particular moment.
I would say probably there's a couple things, but like I mentioned just earlier, is going through and watching that last day of my dad's death, because I saw him in the morning. He was being transferred from a hospital to a rehab facility, and I went to the hospital and I saw him, talked to him in the morning. He was talking clearly, and then he got moved to a rehab, and by the time my mom got to the rehab, as she was walking in, he had a pulmonary embolism, and then he started pretty much going flatline, just started losing his life. And there was pretty much nothing can do, even when the rehab facility, they're calling EMS, and all of them are going crazy. And my mom's, understandably not seeing her husband over 53 years dying. They're doing CPR, they're doing all kinds of things. And it was just one of those things that I'm trying to communicate with EMS, trying to see what they're trying to do. They're trying to revive him, get a pulse, get him back to the hospital. My mom's going, and I'm trying to also call my brother, because he's actually a doctor, and he's also here in Houston, but he's at his own facility, telling him, hey, we got to come over to this hospital. And trying to handle so much. And it's not one of those things that you kind of reflect upon, but later on you kind of know, okay, it's almost like the training kicks in. You know how when they say, why do the military go over drills and drills? Why do police and firemen go over drills and drills?
Right.
Why do people go to practice? You run the play over and over again.
Muscle memory.
Because there's always something unexpected. You cannot draw up a play or draw up a scenario. Okay, the robber's going to come out of right behind the bushes, and then you're going to be able to get him. You never know what's going to happen. But if you have enough training, you can almost, like what they do in football, call that audible. You got to be able to do a little bit of shifting, and adapt. And then I think one thing happened is back in like 2010. I went to work for someone else. I wanted to see, how it was to work for a kind of bigger company. And then after 6 months, the sales were not going there, but it was a long sales cycle, but they wanted immediate sales. I almost walked into a no-win situation, but I get fired after 6 months. And I didn't realize it in the beginning, what a kind of a blessing it was. But in the moment, it just felt like, the feeling of rejection. We don't want you. You're no good. And I later on I realized, okay, I went into probably about a 3-4 month depression. It wasn't like major depression. I still had my other company to run, but I realized I was off. And you don't really realize when you're in the moment how you're off. But I try to tell people it's okay to struggle. And I think sometimes we're getting these messages either in social media or in present day is that everyone wants to be okay, and realize that somehow the word struggle or work for it is becoming something like a 4-letter word, and saying the reason why you can become much more accepting of the situation is through the struggle, because I think through the struggle you find yourself.
Right. And I used to work at a children's home with at-risk children, at-risk youth, and when they would get angry, we have to be there as the counselors to speak to them to make sure they don't over-escalate. We de-escalate the situation. But one thing I used to tell them, I said, it's okay for you to be angry. It's about what you do after you get angry is what you can't take back, or what you can progress forward with. And if I hear you speak about these things, it just honed true how I felt about those feelings about it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have these emotions. Is what you do after these things come up. What type of affirmations did you build yourself on every day to make sure that practice was being done so you're ready for these moments? What type of affirmations were you telling yourself?
Well, I think it's changed over the years. The last 2 years, the thing that I've really implemented, and I think that that's kind of propelled me, especially since I've started this new company the last year and a half, is being grateful. I think if number one, to be grateful that I'm alive these 24 hours, this day, I can do
Mhm.
something with this day. Like they always say, this could be your last day. Well, I don't believe it is. I believe there's so much more out there, but let's just take that message saying that this is your last day. Okay, what can I do in these 24 hours? I'm grateful that I was able to wake up, get on this podcast with you, and share some information, and also being grateful for the different relationships that have been placed in front of me. And then I have the ability to either work the relationship or not work the relationship.
Right.
A lot of times people I want to be loved more, I want to be respected more, or I want these other people to look at me a different way. Well, if we actually work the relationship and do our part, we're more than likely going to get that love back. If we love another person, we'll get love back. If we respect other people, we'll get respect back. If we treat people correctly, or the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated, you'll be treated the way you want to be treated. But if you act all crazy or demanding or feeling entitled, people pick up on that, and they don't reciprocate that type of either emotion or behavior. And then the other thing is I believe God, higher power, has given us all different gifts and talents, and I'm
Right.
grateful for the different gifts and talents I was given. And then I have an opportunity to develop those talents and gifts, or to seek out more training and education to get better at those gifts. And so that's my current affirmation, is being grateful every day for my life, my relationships, and my gifts.
You're the second person to tell me within 48 hours that your first affirmation is being grateful. My brother tells me every morning he gets up, he talks about being grateful, and he also makes his bed so he can get him one win early in the day to get his day
Good.
started. And I think those are some great things that people need to listen to: being grateful, understanding universal talk, understanding the power of your words, understanding you are what you want to be deep down inside the essence of you. We talked about your work ethic. We talked about where it came from. We touched on small things about recovery and being a part of a resurgence. Talk to me about the first time you started to goal set. How did you motivate yourself? What books did you read? What brought you to the point of goal setting and achievement?
Well, I think that came at different points in my life. I was, like I said, grew up in a house that kind of says, okay, get the highest grades that you can get. I was more of an A/B student, but I pushed myself athletically, just going into the workout room, practicing. I played football and basketball. So I was always trying to push myself to get on the court or lift or, prepare myself. I had kind of, at that time, I didn't write down goals. I didn't know growing up that, the value of actually writing down written goals.
Mhm.
I just had them like in my head. I want to get good grades. I want to, start. I want to score so many points. I want to do certain things. And those were just kind of just mental goals. And I think until after I got out of college, I started reading the importance of actually writing down goals. I don't know where I found out, but they had done studies like back in the 40s about the people who graduated from Harvard. They took like about 100 of the people who graduated from Harvard, and only about like 10 or 15 of them actually written down the goals way back when. And they achieved so much more than the other people that didn't. And I saw, okay, there's power behind this, because once you actually see them written down, they become either they either push you more, or you almost have that extra power, the power of the written word. And so that's something that's has kind of almost like come and gone. Of course, then when, I started to kind of push myself, get, increased my business, did all this, but then went into addiction, and then, came, so it was almost like a roller coaster, even though I had some goals written down, then you almost like get taken over by becoming an emotional slave to, I was a gambler, as well as I like to drink. So I kind of got away from it. But then when I actually got into the 12 steps, they're big on focusing, also writing down certain things, writing down on what you need to improve, take responsibility. So then got back more into writing. And I think it's kind of ebbed and flowed. But now lately, the last number of years, I've been much more focused on not only writing them down, but, staying with it as a lifelong process, not just a moment thing. Like, I got to get through school, or I want to get this job, something like that.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see the maturation of it. The power of the written word is something that really stood out that you said to me just now. And I am just so humbled to hear that other people are writing things down. And it really does matter when you think of the process yourself and actually write it yourself. Someone doesn't write it for you. It's just a different, lack of better terms, a different type of magic that comes out of it. It's a different type of universal love. Now, we talked about this work ethic. We talked about you climbing the mountain of success in sports, seeing contentment inside of your sereneness, through all this knowledge and growth in life to get where you are today. What did you sacrifice?
What did I sacrifice? I don't know if I sacrificed. I guess the word sacrifice is a tricky word.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I could almost say it's like I sacrificed my life. I had to go through, but here's one of the things is people say, like, I sacrificed my life to go through this road of addiction, road of recovery. But then if I didn't go through all the addiction, I never would have been able to find myself. And then I actually almost have this almost like new appreciation for life, for business, for love, for relationships, just to live differently. That's why I talked before, is it's almost valuable to have people struggle. Because I think within the struggle, it may be kind of similar to your sacrifice, your word sacrifice. I would maybe say it's more of a struggle, that I had to just sacrifice and then almost like throw everything out of your life. I'd heard this about writing a speech. Even if you write a whole speech, you take everything out of the speech, and then if you want to make your speech memorable, every piece has to audition itself back into the speech. So even though you may think you have this great opening, you have this great story, if it doesn't fit all together, it doesn't fit. So each piece has to audition itself back in. So taking that understanding, it's almost as like through this struggle or sacrifice, everything had to be thrown out of my life, and everything had to have its almost audition to get back into my life. Including family relationships. So how can you don't have to interact with if you interact with your family, let's say every day, but they were constantly getting you tense or stirring up certain triggers within you, well, then you can talk to them once a week. You can manipulate the relationship to what fits you. So it's like everything has to audition, whether it's family relationships, whether it's your job, whether it's your business, whether it's, different parts, hobbies, anything that's to matter. So I would say, part of it is it's almost like I had to sacrifice almost everything that mattered to me to see that, is it really worth it? Almost take your question and look at it from a different angle. It's just like, okay, is this is this worth to keep in my life? Is this currently who I am? Because who I was when I was 20 is different than who I was when I was 30 or 40. And I have to just accept who I am now and who's in my life and what I'm doing currently.
The wisdom and the knowledge of your answer will help feed someone. I believe it's not looking at it a different angle, it's looking at it as the person you are and the nuances that you experience. And there's someone just like you who had experienced the same type of things where that answer rang true and perfect for them. So I love the way you answered it. I love the way you approached it. Let's dive a little deeper here. I want to talk about your lowest moment. And not just talk about your lowest moment. I want to know how you got up. This is for the people right now that might resonate with where you were and trying to get up and establish and reestablish their life and what to put back in, how to reintroduce and audition themselves back into the light. Lowest moment, when you feel like you didn't know yourself, how did you get back up? What did you do?
I'd say the lowest moment was back in 1999. So part of my story is I was a binge drinker and an everyday gambler. So it kind of accelerated in the 90s. So I'm in my 20s, I'm out of college, I've started a business, I have girlfriends. And I finally hit 30. And I'm looking around. I have a number of friends that are married and they either have, their career or their families. But I was mainly looking around and, I thought when I was in high school, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have a house, the whole white picket fence, a wife, probably 2 kids, some type of pet, a dog or a cat. And the only thing I had is I had a business. I did not have a wife, did not have the house, did not have, the kids. I was looking around and I was thinking, what am I doing wrong? Or why do I feel miserable? And so part of the story is, and part of it goes through like certain videos. So, I have a YouTube channel where I kind of go over a lot of things that I've kind of experienced. So I try to be as transparent as possible so people see all the accomplishments I've done, as well as all the struggles and all the banging my head against the wall type of events. Mm-hmm. And so it just came to the point where I had this huge fight with a girlfriend at the time, and we just ended. I went home and I just kind of reevaluated my life, and I said, okay, I got to do something different. At that point, I stopped drinking, but I continued to gamble because I was a bigger gambler than drinker. So then I went on a 3-year, I'm just going to gamble, I'm not going to drink. So, which doesn't help, because you can, it's like that thing like before is like we talked about the work ethic. I could tell people I'm not drinking, I'm going to therapy, I'm doing good, I'm not. So here's the thing, I'm not. I'm actually getting worse, but I was able to hold up this badge of I'm not drinking and I'm going to therapy. So
let me ask you this question that came in my head. Were you betting to them that you wouldn't drink? Was that a part of the actual initial mindset? Like, I bet you I won't take a drink because you were more bigger a gambler than you were a drinker.
No, because they could not. The way I like to gamble, they weren't willing to take. I don't get any satisfaction out of a $5 bet. It's like,
hey, okay.
It's like, when the drug addict sees like half a line, he goes, "What are you joking? Who bets $5?" I bet $5 my first bet when I was in 6th grade.
Right.
We're talking about hundreds of dollars. We're talking about, more money than you're actually making. That's real gambling. When you're so crazy is that you're gambling more money than you actually have in your bank account.
Right.
You just assume you're going to win. So here's the thing. So then finally in half of 1998 and all of 1999, I gambled every single day except for 2 days. It was the Monday and the Wednesday around before and after the baseball all-star game. Now, you could probably go, and you couldn't even go to the horse track or the dog track because most things are closed on a Monday. It's like, so that was like the day of pulling your hair out. So you're talking about the lowest point. So the lowest point is in March 1999, I actually called a hotline for compulsive gamblers. Where are the 12-step meetings? I wrote down where there was at that point only 5 meetings for gamblers. And obviously there's plenty for alcohol or drugs, but there was only 5. I wrote them down and I said, okay, and now I know where they're at, but I took 0 action. So I continued to be in this depression. I wasn't suicidal, but I was self-sabotaging, which was the equivalent of almost like a self-suicide, even though I wasn't actively thinking, okay, this is the last day of my life. But I was killing myself on a daily basis. Just I wasn't actually verbalizing it. And I'll go through that whole year is that feeling more miserable, more depressed, more hopelessness. So then when I finally called back a year later in March 2000, I got the rooms where they were, the addresses, and I went. And one of those things is I didn't have any faith in the program, even though I'd been around 12-step. I read a lot of literature. I've been in therapy. So I've done a lot of things that actually almost started cultivating and putting those seeds. The seeds were there.
Yeah.
But when you don't water the seed, nothing much happens. And so I needed to, so I didn't have any faith and I didn't feel loved. It always felt like no one was loving me the way I wanted to be loved. I was in that self-pity mode. It's like, how come no one loves me the way I want to be loved? Now, trust me, I wasn't loving people. I wasn't listening or trying to love people the way they needed to be loved or anything. But it was almost that immature behavior is I want something, yet I'm unwilling to give of myself. The only thing that I had is I had a little bit of hope that maybe something could happen. And so I went to that first meeting, and even though I felt miserable, even though I gambled right before I went into the meeting, because like I said, is if I'm going to listen to a bunch of people talk about not gambling, at least I have to have that gambling high in me. It's almost like the people who walk into other meetings either drunk or high, because who wants to listen to a bunch of sober people? They're probably irritating as hell. So I gotta not listen to. But I did actually have hope, and so then I went to a meeting the next day, and then that began the process. So you hear this a lot. I was tired of feeling tired. It got to the point where I have to do something. And then I just slowly but surely just started to listen more. And I finally got ready because I had to deal with, it wasn't just dealing with the gambling addiction. I just had to deal with my stuff, whether it was childhood stuff, whether it was adult stuff, whether it was relationship stuff, whether it was sexual stuff, whether it was financial stuff. You name it. I had issues, whether it was about being bullied, about, a lot of things that I never processed. Like I said before, is that I think a lot of people, they go through life and they don't have the ability to process events or situations that happen to them at any point in their life. And then it stays within them. It doesn't magically go away with time. And I think, unfortunately, people believe that, and that's actually a false myth. You have to deal with it, or it never gets resolved.
That's one thing I like to say. I came up with something saying trauma creates heroes and it creates predators. Most of us are formed from our traumas in life, and we make a decision how we're going to either be repeat offenders of that trauma or defenders of it. And I think that's where most people's causes come from. Sometimes some of us dwell in it and don't realize that we are perpetuating it, and then we get up and stand up for the right reasons. How important is it to leave where you're from to develop yourself to where you're going?
Okay, repeat that again. I mean, the last part.
How important is it to leave where you're from to develop yourself to where you're going? To leave your environment so you can grow and come back? How important is that?
It's probably vital, because almost is like that whole situation. So I'll give you one piece of that. So I went to that first meeting for compulsive gambling in March. It was the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. That's where I placed the bet before I went into that first meeting. Now for the next month, I would be going to meetings, and then like every other day was like maybe I would bet like twice a week, whether it was baseball or basketball. But I was still in my environment, and because I always got either triggered, or I just felt miserable, or I felt lonely. But I went to Portugal. I had already a trip that was planned by myself, and I went to Portugal. I almost had to get out of the environment to spend some quiet time by myself for 2 weeks to kind of reevaluate myself. Similar to what you're asking is sometimes you got to get out of that situation. You got to get out of the neighborhood. You got to distance yourself, or really limit yourself from family or close friends. And sometimes it may be tricky, because some people may have more complicated lives. I was single at the time, so it was easy to almost turn the lights out, to check out. But if you're married, if you have kids, it does become more complicated, because you have other people's lives that may be depending on you. And so it becomes trickier. But then hopefully you have a spouse or a family. Now, more than likely, if you're an addict, the spouse or someone who's living with you is probably at their wit's end with all the stories, the lies. And so they're not maybe the person that's, you hear it from both sides. Some people have been really helpful. Some people are like, F you, you've done all this stuff. Why would I believe you now?
Right.
But it is kind of, sometimes you got to take a step back. And if you can't do it like within family, I would say is at least do something to try to take a step away, so you can almost do some type of retreat or some type of revival or some type of ability, whether it's to travel, whether it's just to stay at home and just not answer the phone, but I do think it's so important. You can't rediscover who you are if you're constantly connected with everybody, everything. So if you can completely disconnect just so you can almost reevaluate your life, the better. But you have to do at least something to really kind of shut people out for at least, a week, 2 weeks, a month, to kind of just get, but then it goes back to what you earlier said. Then you have to write down. Here's that thing so I'm coming out with this online course, and part of it comes out with certain questions. And the first question is what do you want? And and I'll tell you how I came to that question is you remember the movie Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
When Robin Williams is the therapist and he's talking to Matt Damon, Will. And he asked him, he goes, "Oh, you're so smart. You have an answer for everything. I ask you a simple question. What do you want?" And you don't have an answer. And there's to me, it was like the most pivotal part of the movie, because then I think it really got Will to think. Even though he was smart, he was well-read, he knew all the answers to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But when it was asked a question about him and his life, he was befuddled. He was confused.
He spent a lot of time learning.
So that's what I said.
Lives. Yeah.
No. So that's what I said. So it comes back to that thing. Is what do you want? So I think that when you want to reevaluate your life, you got to ask yourself, what do you want?
Absolutely. And I want everyone who's listening to this channel and beyond, make sure you tune in for that online course to get your development going from Mr. Hugo here. We just got a few more questions for you today, and we're going to be on our way. But we thank you for letting us dive deep into one of your lowest moments. But now we're going to lighten up the load a little bit. We're going to go into some fun, rapid questions so we can wrap everything up. And I like to ask my guests, men, these questions because I want to know across the spectrum around the world, have you ever had a sex talk? Who or what gave you sex education?
No, I did not. I didn't even get it from my father. So I learned a few things from my brother, but he was only 2 years older. like I always said, it's like the blind leading the blind.
Yeah.
He didn't know much.
Why do you think we shy away from these things? Such a deep topic, is something you're gonna love doing, something that's exciting that our parents, or we have to learn from our counterparts who don't know anything at all.
Right. And they give you, most of the time, they're either giving you bad advice or advice that doesn't work. Or you try to, especially now, I think it's probably even worse now growing up, because there is so much more information, good information and bad information on the internet or on videos or all kinds of crazy stuff. And here's the scary part. So I'll answer your question. I read a statistic that to me is very scary, which is talking about that currently more guys in their 20s have ED, erectile dysfunction issues, than ever before in their lives, mainly because they're attributing to this on the research is that because people are watching sexual videos at a much younger age. Also, it's not like before when I was growing up, even if there was the videos that I saw either in high school or college, it was either one guy with one woman or two women, or it was one guy with two women or two guys with one woman. It's kind of something, based. So it's so similar. It's either it's either one-on-one or it's a threesome.
Yeah.
But now there's all kinds of crazy stuff, group sex stuff. They're talking about the research about the group sex and also with a lot of this like pain and pleasure stuff, choking and all kinds of, and then other things that could be involved, animals or objects. And so I think all of that stuff. So here's the thing. So they're saying this is when they finally get into high school or college and they're about to have their first experience, they don't get turned on because you almost need something. It's almost like we talked before. It's like, I don't get turned on by a $5 bet. A Coke guy doesn't get turned on by half a line of Coke.
Right.
So why would some guy get turned on if it's just like, and he doesn't know what he's doing? She probably, doesn't. I mean, who knows? They're probably, even if they probably, they've maybe had one or two other partners. They still don't understand their bodies. What do they like? So they're talking about how men, and because you're talking to a lot of men, and I think it's very important to realize is how the porn industry, which you can learn some things from porn, which I feel like I learned some things from porn.
Absolutely.
But you can also have to be very careful that how it can affect you, because then you're relying on porn to get you turned on, and you're not living in the day-to-day in reality. And it's just like that whole thing is like when I'm gambling, I don't have a reality of the dollar. I'm not appreciating each hard-earned dollar, because I'm just throwing out numbers as though I'm Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, like, money's not an object when it wasn't. When I gambled because of action. I gambled because of emotional issue. I didn't gamble because of money, but I didn't have the amount of money. It's the same thing with with sex and stuff. Mm-hmm. So you talk about, I think it's very important. And what it's also scary is that when I grew up, we actually had in middle school, I went to a public middle school and I went to an all boys private college preparatory high school.
Where at?
But in both, I'm sorry?
Where?
In Houston, Texas, straight Jesuit. Okay. And then the middle school was Spring Oaks, is here in Houston, Texas.
Because I went to all boys high school as well. Please continue.
I'm sorry, where?
I went to all boys high school in New York. I thought, because your parents are from New York.
I know, but I thought you said you named it. What was the name?
Oh, Mount St. Michael Academy.
Okay. Yeah. But here's the thing. In both the public school as well as the private school, mm-hmm. We learned certain things in health education. And now it is, unfortunately, because a lot of these different groups get involved Like I don't want my child to learn about sex in school, that there's less sex being taught in schools. And I think sex should be taught in both at the home and at school. And I think you can balance the both, but I feel like we're doing a disservice to the upcoming generations by almost relying on
Media.
social media and computers, and then not even getting any type of good information that really could be so valuable. Here's the thing, what you say is what are 3 things that you wish you learned in high school that you probably didn't? You learned a little bit about sex. 3 things that they don't talk about. They don't talk about your EQ, your emotional IQ. They don't talk about financial literacy, and they don't talk about sex. Well, guess what happens? In life, we're going to be dealing with emotions, and relationships are about emotions. And even though people, it's not, kind of question, I always say every relationship's about, especially it's between a man and a woman, every relationship's about money and sex. You can't avoid that. And people say is like, are you afraid that you're like a woman wants you wants to evaluate you based on how much money you can make? Or do women feel like guys evaluate them based on their sexiness or their femininity? Mm-hmm. And I go, well, that's human nature. Of course, everything is about money and sex and God and emotions. You cannot run away from. It's like the things like we says, you can't run away from what we all deal with. They're all going to come up.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that we can tribally come together in our neighborhoods and have a level of education outside the school, outside the Boys and Girls Club, outside the church, where we teach our kids financial literacy, communication, how to change a tire, gardening, general wealth building, stocks and trade, speaking with the elderly with intent? Do you ever think we can come up with these small pockets so we can have them ready for the actual world, even though we have the other institutions in place?
Yeah, we should do. But I think a lot of that should be, part of that should be accessible, available in school, as well as almost, whether it's like within your podcast or something else, almost make a list.
Right.
Whether you're a man or a woman, yes, maybe you don't have the physical strength to change a tire, but you should at least know how to change a tire. Right. You should know how to start a dead battery. You should be able to cook an egg or boil water, make pasta. You should be able to bake, do certain amount of cooking, follow certain recipes. You should be able to grow certain vegetables. Like you were saying, you should be able to learn about basic ways to talk about emotions, how to deliver a speech, how to write a sales letter or write. And nowadays it seems like everybody comes up with their own spelling for every word. Is like, I don't even know if anybody knows how any word is spelled anymore, because you could have 5 different spellings for one word, when before you would look up in Webster, okay, this is exactly how you spell a word. And then you go on and you follow the rest of your list. But yeah, I think what you came on, financial literacy, is absolutely, whether it's stocks and bonds or how, real estate, owning property, and learning the tax code.
Right. What you spoke about before, to go back, when you spoke about ED, right? And how the sexualization of our population can help hurt men's mind when it comes to getting that point where their dopamine is kicking in to want to engage in the moment. I've also read information about how Alzheimer's is going to actually almost double within the next 30 years because of all this technology we have that doesn't require for us to learn how to spell, learn to add, remember numbers like we once did in the past. Like, our minds are not being challenged enough in order to build the muscle of memory to capitulate and capture memories. I read some information about that. How do you feel about that in the regards of, like, my grandmother, she can tell you 30 numbers off the top of her head. Most people don't know their own cell phone numbers. Most people don't memorize or use their memories for anything. They all store it away in the cloud. They store it in their phones. They don't have to use their memories or their mind. They're not working that muscle. How do you feel about that approach?
I'll start off with a joke. So I've been arrested twice. So what happens if you get arrested and someone says, okay, you get one phone call, and you say, and they've taken your phone. and you don't know any phone numbers. Who are you going to call? You can't call 911. You can't call the operator. Connect me with so-and-so. So I think it's vital. Now, this shouldn't be a reason why you need to memorize at least one phone number. If you go to jail, who you gonna call? But that would be at least motivation.
Right.
You never know what happens. I always say you can never say never. It's like, I think some of the best things, because one thing you learned, I can tell you one thing about being arrested. I hate handcuffs. The way those metal handcuffs, and I think the cops could do it on purpose. Because, you can put it at certain different sizes.
Yeah.
And I could feel it just like eating into the skin. When they finally took it off, you could just see, and they were only on for maybe 15 minutes. By the time I got booked, it's just like, but I can tell you that is motivation to learn money. But here's the thing is, the one thing that I will say about memory and Alzheimer's, I think, we are trying to learn more about the brain, and we've learned so much more about the brain, as we've learned more about addiction, especially now being in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan for so many years, and so many soldiers that have suffered head trauma, now learning so much about the NFL and concussions. As a world, we are finally trying to understand the brain better. And I think it comes to your question about Alzheimer's. Here's two things that people really need to understand, to me, is about the brain. Is, first of all, the brain is mostly comprised of water. I think it's about 70%. And there's a certain other high percentage of oil. That's why I'm Croatian, so my grandparents are Croatian. So there's a part of me that, has that Mediterranean. I love certain aspects of, they look at different cultures that live the longest. There's like certain villages like in Italy, certain villages like in Japan that have lived so long. Part of it is the lifestyle and what they eat and how they work about. The other thing is they drink and they use olive oil a lot on their foods, because you actually need more healthy oils. A lot of times people get so obsessed with weight issues and realizes, well, I'm going to take out a lot of fat, and thinking that oils are fatty, or eating certain types of nuts are fatty. And you need a certain amount of fats in your body, which I think is nutrients to your brain. But I do think you have to balance it. I'm a firm believer, as I think a lot of people are going through Alzheimer's with all the toxins and all the plastic, and realizing so much plastic is in everyday life, even on the pillows that you sleep on. All the food that's stored now in plastic, which used to be glass, because we were more afraid of a broken jar than we are of actually the toxins that are going to seep into the food, which will then end up in our body, which then could cause so many more cancers. Because I believe a lot of that's because a lot of the cancers and a lot of the Alzheimer's is because of our increased use of plastic in almost every facet of our lives. But here's the thing is, I think there's so much more out there. I do think you should do more of those games, challenge yourself. I came up with a great memory because I never knew how to spell, use like all the different techniques. Like people would say, this is like, well, sound the word out, do this. Part of it may be, I had a small form of dyslexia. Some of it could have been ADD. Some of it could be, none of that made sense to me as a child. And as much as they try to teach me all these different ways, is I didn't want to be called dumb by my classmates. So I had to find another way. And so I just had to memorize words. I didn't learn any techniques. I memorized how words were spelled. In turn, I made my memory stronger because I had to deal with the difficulty, and I had to deal with, okay, my motivation was, I don't want to be called dumb. Find a solution. kind of like what you're saying, find a solution. So I ended up with a great memory because I don't want a negative outcome. So yeah, going back to your thing is yeah, but you got to challenge your name. That's why I think all those different, like whether it's numbers or stuff, you got to challenge your memory in anything.
Absolutely. I do that myself. I memorize words and I can sound them out, but with today's sounds and the way people enunciate words these days, you won't know how to sound words out if you listen to how people talk on the internet. So a lot more people are memorizing words better than you think. Especially, I told you I worked at a children's home. Some of my kids would fake the funk. We think they know how to read, but they just memorize certain words to make you think they know how to read. So they read that. They read it. They won't read out loud. They'll be like, this says that, because they memorize these certain words. So it's actually an extra tool you can use on top of all your senses. I'm going to put you in the husband chair for one more question. Then we're going to close this thing out. I want to thank you for being on the show today, but I like to put you on the husband chair. Are you ready for this question?
Yes.
It's one of my questions that is subjugated towards your personal preference. It's one of my favorite questions. I like to have fun with it. As a husband, would you rather have a great woman or a great wife?
I thought the when you first started that question, I thought it was going to be, would you rather have a good mother or a good wife? Because I think a lot of times people say that. I would say based just on my preferences, I'd want a good woman. Because here's the thing, because to me is I want a woman who knows herself. To me, as a wife would feel almost like, it's not how I believe, but you know how it can almost be interpreted as like a possession. I have this great car, I have this great house, I have this great wife. I'd rather just be associated with, I'm in a relationship for the last 3 years with my girlfriend. And I feel, number one, I feel like our relationship is much stronger because I've learned from the previous relationships of what kind of worked and what didn't. And I also learning more about myself and being more clear of who I am. You can't be a good husband or or a good boyfriend if you don't know who you are.
Right.
You know, we sometimes seek out people to make us feel better or to sometimes elevate us, but that's not possible if we don't know who we are. And then we should be content, single or in a relationship. But what I'll say is so the type of woman that I want, and I can tell you, I wrote down, I saw this about 3 years ago. A lot of times people say, well, I want a woman that either has this size breasts, or she's got to have a good ass, or she's got to be smart. I want her to have a college degree, or I don't want her to have any kids, or, a lot of people make up these lists that really don't mean anything. They're really just, to me, so what they were talking about is characteristics. So I look back on, I was in a previous relationship for about 12 years, and then I was with a woman for about 3.5 years. And so the first woman didn't have any kids. The second woman did have 3 kids. And so there were different types, different types of relationships. So my current girlfriend has 1 child. So I've looked at it from different angles. But I looked back at my relationships and I said, okay, what did I really like about this woman? What did I like about this other woman? And so what the question really was is you should develop characteristics. What is most important to you? Not physical features or specific age or whether or not they have kids or not. And so I came up with, okay, they said, okay, they were supposed to list 10 characteristics that really motivate you or what you want in your life, 10 things that you really don't like. So I will just say, I'll say so the number 1 characteristic that I wanted was a woman that had a loving nature. She really just had to, and to me, loving nature meant that not only did she love herself and how she interacted with her family, with her friends, and how she was, like even with a stranger, was she kind of welcoming. Had nothing to do with physical beauty or how smart. And so the other thing is that was important to me is that her sense of humor. Because if we can't laugh together, I think a relationship, especially a loving relationship, is doomed. Because there's two things that I think that any relationship should have, or a person should do every day. And one of those things is laugh.
Laugh.
If you're not laughing every day, you're not enjoying life. You're not getting to the crux. Because even like I said, even if someone dies, I can look back and go, oh, I remember when me and my dad did this. That was a funny story. I can
There's a
still
balance.
cry. You
There's
can
a
cry,
balance.
you can laugh, you can do all kinds of things.
Mhm.
And so it goes back to that whole thing. And the other thing is to me is I wanted a woman who understood her femininity. And when I mean femininity, almost like her sexiness. What makes her sexy and what makes her sexy to me? I mean, I like a woman like with high heels. I like a woman, who when we go out, spends some time, puts herself together, because, just like I want to do the same thing, to me so I think going to your question, it goes, to me, it's important to have a woman who, as well as myself, who understands herself as well as I understand myself. And I think then you can have a really successful relationship and enjoyable, and not be focused on, I want a woman that, people say, well, I just want a woman, it's going to be a great mother and she's going to be great in bed. Okay. Yeah. Who doesn't want that? But there's more to being in a relationship than kids and the bedroom.
Absolutely. I speak to people constantly on this show about also looking for intelligence in a woman, all the forms of it, emotional intelligence, all the different layers in that regard too, because you want somebody to be able to speak on your level, also to motivate you. That's one of my biggest things that I also preach about. And I love the fact that you talked about the nuances of relationships, like the 5 love languages, what you need, what you learn, bringing information over from other relationships to best suit your personal interests, so you know how to give out love. Thank you. I appreciate that answer. Thank you, sir. You are now part of the Silhouette Boys Club. It is people like you who move in the shadows to help people like me shine. Now, before you go, Mr. Hugo, we love to get referrals for the show. Is there any man you'd like to recommend to come on this show to drop these gems and answer these questions?
I'll give you a man who's a classmate of mine in my MBA school, and I'll send out your information, is Galen Bingham. I think you would enjoy. He's got his own podcast. He's got his own history, and I think he'd be a good person to add to your solutions.
Absolutely.
To help guide everything what you're trying to impart on the world.
Absolutely, sir. Before you go, I came up with something called operating at 100%. And what I mean by that is I took 5 categories. I took purpose, health, confidence, money, and knowledge. Again, that's purpose, health, confidence, money, and knowledge. And I gave them 20% each, totaling out to 100. You take 24 hours of your day, you take purpose, health, confidence, knowledge, and you say purpose, I'm living in my purpose, I'm doing the work I need to do. Health, I'm exercising, eating right, meditating and praying. Confidence, I'm doing it confidence without any insecurities or fear. Money, made a little money, saved a little money, invested or gave to some charity. And knowledge, I learned something new. So I asked you, Mr. Hugo, within the last 24 hours, how much of 100% have you been operating out of, with purpose being 20, health being 20, confidence being 20, money being 20, and knowledge being 20?
Out of 100%, I would say, because it was a Sunday.
Yeah.
I would say 75, because 75. I did something. I feel like I'm living my purpose every day. I'm pushing life is wonderful. And the one thing I will say is, people don't want to learn more about me. It's lifeiswonderful.love, because I feel like not only is life is wonderful, but you got to be able to impart love. You got to incorporate both. And I was able to get all that in my domain name, as well as IG and all that stuff. In health, I actually spent the last 24 hours. Actually, now I went to bed aching because I had to repair a certain portion of my mom's fence. So I spent 8 hours.
That's working out.
It was. It was like I had my brother's son helping me. It was 8 hours of doing it was healthy in terms of getting out in the sunshine, getting into some vitamin D.
Yeah, listen, healthy. It's
getting
work.
the drill out, getting the hammer out,
yeah.
digging holes, doing all that type of stuff. So that was healthy. Knowledge on how when a tool breaks, you still got to go first. So we had this like a post digger. Stupid thing broke because I got borrowed. That's a dumb thing. Sometimes you borrow tools from your cousin. Gives me this old tool. One of the handles breaks and I still got to go, but the post had to be a certain height. So I still got to dig the holes with other types of tools. So I had to use different types of knowledge and be creative.
And now your cousin has a new tool.
Well, I already had kind of, put things in place by shipping, earlier in the week, shipping more stuff out today. So kind of money's already kind of flowing. Didn't actually, sell. And then,
confidence.
Oh yeah, the confidence is new and like trying to reassure. Even though my mom liked to impart some of her suggestions, I was saying, "Okay, no, we got this." Some of her suggestions were helpful, but sometimes had to balance everybody's suggested confidence is that we'll get this done.
I find it hilarious that you had to actually buy your cousin a new tool because his broke now. That's the sneaky move he pulled.
No, actually, here's the thing: is he had like 4. He lives on a ranch. He's got like 4 of them. He gave me his oldest one. He says, "Oh, you can just keep it." Like, this is before it broke. So I'm like, okay, you gave me the one that you had for 20 years. It's probably been outside, been beaten up.
Right. Mr. Hugo, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I know you already spoke about your .com and where we can find you, but please let the people know once again where we can find you, how we can support you, how we can push your agenda.
Okay, so here's the thing. So my whole purpose for the last year and a half in continuing, I'm changing the face of recovery. So if you're dealing with any type of addiction and you're trying to understand the 12 steps of recovery, whether you're dealing with emotions like anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, you're trying to understand things like gratitude, contentment, spirituality, emotions. All those can be found in all types of videos that I have on lifeiswonderful.love. That is the domain name. The website is actually almost like the foundation of everything. You can find everything there, which everything kind of branches out. Whether my Instagram is also lifeiswonderful.love. And that's the easiest way to find my YouTube channel. So if you just do Life is Wonderful YouTube, I'm way down because I'm trying to build up subscribers. So if people want to see a video that they like, subscribe to my YouTube channel, that'd be great. Or you can go to my IG. That's also, I've done some TikToks under lifeiswonderful.love. I'm kind of trying to build up, trying to start a podcast, but everything can be found like Ascent. If you just go to the website, then that is kind of be the hub. And then you can find and pick and choose what you feel can be beneficial. And so now here in this last month, here in April and going into May, I'm coming up with this online course. So a lot of people struggle with, I don't know how to work the steps. And a lot of people will say, well, just read this book, read, the big book, read this, or follow what other people did. And here's the thing. The reason I came up with this online course is because it seems like a lot of people nowadays want recovery now. They don't want to go through the struggle, which none of us really want to, but they want to kind of speed it up. And also is the original 12 steps of recovery were written in 1935. And I've heard all the different almost obstacles, the people, why they don't want to either work the steps or they struggle with the steps. So what I did is I rewrote the steps. So like to me is instead of saying we are powerless over alcohol, powerless over gambling, our lives become unmanageable, I rewrote it to say we believed a lie. So I kind of shortened all the different steps. And so instead of like in the 12th step, it talks about upon having a spiritual awakening, we carry this message to whether compulsive gamblers, alcoholics. So the last 12th step is faith, hope, love. So what I've done is kind of shorten them, made them concepts, but really to tap in more about how each step can kind of elevate us, either tapping it in from an emotional standpoint or a spiritual. A lot of people say we just got to get to the emotional disease, but you can't deal with an emotional disease if you don't have any spiritual guidance or spiritual foundation. And you can't just go to church. Like, I had a lot of different family members, people say, well, if you just need to pray harder, you just need to do this. Well, you can't deal with a lot of issues if you just deal it within a religious environment. You also have to look at it from the emotional standpoint.
Absolutely.
So that's how. So the online course takes you through each step. So it's what it's going to be designed is it's 12 steps, and each step has 3 questions. Because some other books I've seen is like way too many questions, and I know addicts way too well is the fewer the questions, the more likely they are to complete the recovery. But you can't do things in 5 questions. So I thought I broke it down into something that is reasonable and workable. 3 questions for each step to kind of guide you. And throughout these 36 questions, you're going to have a much better step of understanding, number one, of who you are. Because that is what life is wonderful.love is. I'm empowering people through self-awareness. So I'm trying to get you to understand yourself better. I'm trying to understand these other people. And so that's the whole guide of it. So my goal is to have this done probably here within about a month. And then people can sign up, pay for the course, and kind of get their lives in order. Now, in the meantime, the good news is that you can go to my YouTube channel. All the videos there are free. You can evaluate me all you want. You can judge me. You can see if I have not only the knowledge, but the entertainment value, the ability to make you smile, the ability to make you think, the ability to make you feel. Because I think you have to do both. I think people we're going to invest is, number one, is do they believe you? And when you hear all the good stories and the bad stories, all the things that I've done, and I talk about all that stuff in all the different videos, is that you can then see, okay, is this person genuine? And not only genuine, can this person help me? And I feel for this. I go, look, I know my stuff is excellent because I've spent over 20 years. It's almost like I've done going to meetings. I've done this work, going to therapy. I was in therapy for over 7 years. And then I went back and did couples. I've done a lot of this emotional. I've done a lot of the religious, spiritual stuff, retreats. And this is what I'm trying to incorporate into a course. I'm trying to utilize all my learnings, just like people, after they get a PhD,
right.
I've done all this stuff. And so I'm trying to impart all the different wisdom that either I've learned or I've gathered from others and put it into a course that can really help people move ahead and get in control of their lives. Because I just want people to live their life the way they want to, not how anybody else wants to. I want them to understand themselves better and to grow. So that's where I'm going.
Absolutely, Mr. Hugo V. Thank you so much for all of what you just said. Please, everyone, participate, grow the page. We want to see Mr. Hugo V do all these great things in our society. In fact, everything will be in the description where you can click and go and support and subscribe today. For those who are listening, you can reach me at soulutionsformen@gmail.com to be a guest on the show, or at Sheem1 on all platforms. Let's continue this conversation on Clubhouse, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or in the street if you see me. We end today's show with a quote from Dr. Miles Monroe. True success is not measured by how much you have done or accomplished. It's not compared to what others have done or accomplished. True success is what you have done compared to what you could have done. In other words, living to the maximum is competing with yourself. It's living up to your own true standards and capabilities. Success is satisfying your own personal passion and pursuit of personal excellence. So, question of the day, question of your life. Are you maximizing your life? Mr. Hugo V, we thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Solutions for Men.